find social determinants contributing to the homicide epidemics killing black males before the age of 45. Let's get into the game with the coach, Fitz Hill.
Tonight that I couldn't wait to get into the house right here is almost we're talking about some very, very, very good stuff tonight with juvenile prosecuting attorney Ms. Casey Beard, and she's going to be joining us this entire show. I want to give props up to our man Pastor Drew Davis, who's out tonight, and he's not feeling well, but we got a prime substitute teacher. Yeah, we got a prime substitute teacher in the house with us tonight, and thank you for joining us for First and 45 with Coach Fitz. For tonight, we're going to be addressing social determinants birthing teenage violence, and looking at this from a holistic standpoint, and what we're going to try to do for solutions other than building more prison cells, and look at this from as a game plan. As a football coach, we're losing our men, and we're losing our communities. You know that homicide is the number one cause of death for black males aged 1 to 19, and the number 2 cause of death for black females ages 1 to 19. And we cannot remain silent about this homicide virus that's continued to spread in our community. So Bishop Fred, if you will, open us up with a word of prayer before we get into this game and kick off this show.
Certainly will. God, we thank you for the opportunity to come together once again. We thank you for all of our viewers and our listeners. We thank you for our guests on tonight. We pray that you would help us to equip and empower our listeners, our community, that we can get into the game, as Coach always says, to make a difference, to save lives. It's in your name, Jesus, we pray. Thank God, and amen.
Amen. Well, Casey, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us tonight on such short notice. We always welcome to come with us. I always enjoy being with you and know what you do, and had a chance to go to court with you, to visit the juvenile prison cells with you, and it was really ironic walking through there. The guy started calling my name, and those were some of the guys I had in the 6th grade that I'd coached in during time now, and many of you knew because you were on the other side of the fence as a public attorney, prosecutor, public defender for them, and man, there's just so much I've learned from you in the last year. Recently, I was at church with Mother Yolanda. And you have inspired some other opportunities for alternative sentencing for nonviolent offenders that we're going to talk about what we talk about the rehabilitation process. But really, over the next 5 years, just trying to look at strategies that can be transformational for changing the trajectory of youth, particularly the youth that are charged for violent crimes. And last year, what we found, and I shared this a few weeks ago, but looking at this specific homicide virus within our communities, because at times people will ask me, why do I continue talking about this for the violence within particular population? And I said it's because it's the only population that is an epidemic. Mm-hmm. And so, did you pray yet?
I did. Yes.
Okay, all right. So my mind, yeah. And so we're trying to address this, and the vision of First and 45 is to bring awareness to the social and economic factors contributing to the youth epidemic of black male homicides. And so, Casey, I appreciate you being here today, and I want to just start out to saying, when you changed hats from being the public defender, okay, to the prosecuting, how difficult was that for you? Because I've seen how you're attached to kids that you're trying to help, and hoping that they're getting on the straight and narrow, and realizing, hey, you're a lawyer, you're going to go by the law is the law. And so, but now you're over, but you had a different framework to look at, see how I can help kids, rather, that's now that I'm having to prosecute.
Right. I mean, there's so many different levels to that answer to me, because I would say, doing what I did for 20 years, I never once had a lack of appreciation for the state. I always knew that even if what I was supposed to do was to sit over there in my role and defend that individual in their best defense, that was my role. And you have to have both roles in a courtroom, and so somebody needing to be held accountable for behaviors and being offered rehabilitative measures within that process for kids, that all made sense to me, and it makes sense to me with both roles. And so while I didn't sit over there wanting or thinking for a bunch of years that I would ever be on the other side, detaching from the individual was kind of hard for me, because you get little wins along that path and that journey, where you see somebody making it longer without getting in trouble, if they do have a family that's accepting the services and accepting the help and working the program that is laid out for them, but you are not working to help the bigger picture, the greater good of that. And so I said, probably even when I was here before, that was the big thing that talked me into going to the other side, was Kelly Ward and Will Jones are my two bosses. Will's our elected official, and Kelly is his chief deputy. They sat, across from me at a lunch table, and they were like, you can take all of that you know, and you can now pour it into youth as a whole, to the community as a whole, instead of each individual that you have to focus on, and you are limited in what you can do for them with what your role is. And they're like, not in this new work. In this new work, you can take all of that and apply it to the big picture. And so we don't get the small wins the same way. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint, and we are working on training for that marathon daily. We are working on stopping at the stations to get our energy put back into us, because it is a lot of work with not a lot of fast payback and a lot of fast reward. But if you think about the big picture being that we are working on prevention, intervention, and turning off that faucet so that there's less prosecution that needs to be had in the future, then that alone is enough to keep us going, I think, day to day, even if we have some if we don't feel those wins as often as we would like to on a daily basis.
So to our listeners and our social media followers, what exactly, give them your title and what a day as a life of a juvenile prosecutor consists of.
And it's changed a little bit even since I came over. I came over to be the juvenile division chief, and now I have been promoted into a job that's called senior deputy. And so I still am over the juvenile division. That is one of the things I'm a senior over. I don't know that I deserve that title most days from being so new to that side, but I do believe that my experience and them putting me over prevention, intervention, communities, families, rehabilitative, courts in general is a new focus in that office, at least since Will has been elected. And so I am creating what that probably looks like day to day, and it does change a whole lot from working within the office in my role to helping younger prosecutors know how to prosecute, just know how to process a case, I would say. I mean, I don't know how to tell anybody any better than the next person how to prosecute, but how to look at both sides. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to sit in a position that looks at the whole picture and watches out for the rights of everyone involved, the rights of our community to be safe, the rights of the victim to be made as whole as they can, and then the rights of that individual that is accused to make sure we're watching out for their civil rights and that. And procedurally, we have done so much before a case ever gets filed. I'm working with law enforcement. I do that on a daily basis. I will take a phone call around the clock. To me, that's a duty to my community. If a law enforcement officer needs some guidance, needs my decision as to whether we're going to pursue a case as a juvenile or pursue a case as an adult charge, whether or not they feel like that they have enough and need us to approve an affidavit, we are there for them, and I think that gives them some confidence. We even are there to push them outside their comfort zone to get the next level of evidence and that sort of thing, because everyone sits in the chair that they sit in and think that their job is finished, but what is the point of an arrest if we aren't going to be able to take it all the way to court and be successful on that for the sake of the community and the victims in it? And so that those hands all working together is a really important part of the process that we have taken on. And then that extension is the same with our community-based providers. That's where I think I'm doing something, with Will's permission and at his extension in the community to, we talk about lived experience, right? A whole lot. My lived experience is not the same as our kids and the youth that we're trying to help. But my lived experience is in the legal system that oftentimes they find themselves in. And so if I can take the knowledge that I have of that legal system and go pour into people like you, pour into people like our community-based providers, 100 families every Arkansan, and teach what that means and what it is that's being done and what these individuals that find themselves in the system are looking at or facing, or who to talk to and link them, then we're providing a service that hasn't ever been provided before either, because knowledge is power. And so if all of these stakeholders in the community want to be working on this effort that we all think is important, that's only going to be done well if they are educated in how to do that.
Correct.
So,
well, you bring up a question, and this is something I've asked you all before. When you have, and it's probably of anything that bothers me more than in around the country, when I see the violence taking place within, juvenile and even 18, 19. When you're 19, 18 is not much difference, but that's the different charge, though.
Right.
But if you have enough evidence to charge a person for a homicide or murder or even attempted murder, because those are the major charges that usually lead to a adult charge, why would that person be permitted because I know you're slow to charge without evidence to prove. A prosecutor is not going to give somebody permission to be picked up unless you think you can execute the case in court, correct? Okay. And wouldn't the streets be safer to knowing with the much evidence that a person couldn't get out of bail if we think that if you have charged them? And I'm only asking that because from the community, when I had Derek Olivier murdered on campus, and I know his mother is probably listening to us tonight, and that's why, this show, then it was real interesting that a year and a half later, a gentleman came to my office who had been arrested for killing a female in North Little Rock, and he was locked up. And I asked him, I said, why are you telling me this now? And he said, well, Dr. Hill, he said, he killed a person in our community that if I had told him that, he hadn't been arrested yet. And so he said, if I continued, I didn't come in here because he was still out. And he said, and I said, well, why are you telling me now? He said, because he's not going to get out because he killed a white female in North Little Rock. And he said, so I'm here to tell you he killed Derek. He said, I was upstairs looking at it. So I was able to pass the information on because he was locked up. But they couldn't prove the charge, but he ended up getting sentenced for another 10 years on a gun charge for another arrest. But I was just saying, so, in the communities where crime is violent, oftentimes they say, snitches get stitches and those type of things. And so people are quiet about coming forth because they say, well, they'll get arrested and they'll get out and then they're going to take us out. And so how does that jive together for?
Well, I mean, my office is going to always agree with you 100% on that, because I think that's where we feel like there has to be a very stark line of difference. It's like I can work all day long on prevention intervention, but at the point where that bang occurs, we have to switch the focus in that situation to the safety of the community and the protection of that victim that we lost that was either hurt very badly or killed. And so the factors for bond is what you're talking about. I mean, to our judges' credit, they have to weigh those factors. They don't just get to set it because they feel like that they should set it. They have to weigh certain factors. And when we go on break, I'll look up those factors so that I'm not doing it while we're talking, but so that you can just see at a quick glance what the factors are.
Well, we're going to take that break right now, and I'll let you do that because it says we're at the hour. But that's something that's just so that people tell me all the time that our communities are. I would tell more if I thought the prosecution, would be more. But you bring up great points, and our listeners, I know I'm asked that quite a bit. But hey, it's First and 45 with Coach Fitz. We're addressing social determinants, birth, and teenage violence. We've got a little history here with juvenile chief, senior juvenile chief, Miss Casey Beard. We're just so happy to have her in the studio with us tonight. Hey, Pastor Drew, we're praying for you. Hope you feel better. It's my guy, Bishop Fred, over here, Coach Fitz. Stay tuned for the second quarter. We'll be right back.
Come on and praise my way to my breakthrough. Oh, dance, every day. Oh, praise my way to my breakthrough. If it had not been.
Hey guys, Drew here, and for the last 11 years, we've worked together to build the Arkansas Dream Center. And over those years, things have grown, opportunities have happened, but we've continued to focus on that mission of every Arkansan chasing their God-given dream. And for that very reason, our corporation is actually known as Every Arkansan Inc. We have two ministries that really work together in tandem to see that mission take place. We have the Arkansas Dream Center, which is going out and we're reaching out to the communities. We're in those communities with mobile trucks. We're doing after school, we're feeding, we're doing all those things you know us for doing. But in addition, we realize that the church is the answer to a lot of society's problems, and there's one on every corner. So we have City Serve that comes along the side of the church, and they provide the resources. They provide furniture and clothing and diapers and all these things to the local churches so they can reach out to their neighbors. And together, when those two start to mesh, we're going out and we're bringing the churches alongside of them, and we're equipping and we're resourcing those churches. We can truly empower the local church with the resources they need to strengthen relationships in their communities. And that's what our vision is for Every Arkansan Inc. And we're so glad you're a part of it.
It's why I dance. I have been set free. Oh, dance.
And we're back with the second quarter, first and 45. Coach Fitzhill, and so glad to have Miss Casey here with us. Great conversation. Coach, what's going on in the second quarter?
Oh, man, we're just going to talk a little bit about our mission. And it's just taking information. The mission of First and 45 is to implement fact-based research and a results-oriented game plan to tackle the social determinants contributing to the deaths and incarceration of black male youth in America. You know, randomly when I speak, people don't realize that this epidemic is as prevalent as it is, and how it's the number one cause of death. As you know, when you see cancer, and I know during football season, y'all know I mentioned the breast cancer, it gets all this attention. When you see prostate cancer, for the stuff that you do, that
right.
People are investing and bringing awareness to it. Opioids, which we see a lot of going now, but it's very rare that you see anybody trying to address this epidemic. And I have a black son-in-law, 3 black grandsons, and why should homicide be the reason, if based on the data,
Right.
that if they don't make the 45, the odds are that they will be victim of violence? And so it's not like, well, it's not where they are, but what we find out or where they live or anything is oftentimes it spreads. That's why I call it the virus, and then it comes over into somebody's community, because hurting people hurt people, and you realize it's just not in your community because, you know, when talking to Yolanda, and how those things happen. Her kid wasn't a bad kid, you know, and so those are things that we must address. As with Derek wasn't a bad kid, right. And so you just never know when that virus is going to come and take a life. You know, I mean, you saying my kid wasn't raised in that environment, so that's why we have to continue to speak out about it. And I think when we look at those facts, you know, and the numbers, you know, what I say, Fred, about the numbers.
Numbers don't lie. Together they tell a story.
I mean, and that's factual. And so when you look at from in October, when Case I took data from October 22nd of 2022
right.
all the way to December 31st of 2023, and there were 47 individuals in Little Rock alone charged as adults. Of the 47, 46 were black. Okay, understanding this population, and we're going to talk about this in the second half. Looking at those, you can almost predict those individuals based on their social condition. And so that's why, you know, First and 45 is trying to put out a game plan and said, okay, if we're really trying to stop this violence in this population of individuals, these are things that we need to do. And it's just much like my dad died of cancer at 51. My oldest brother died of cancer at 41. Why I don't smoke, the things that I limit, you know, alcohol, all the things that allowed them to become to succumb to cancer, that I realize I'm high risk. And so I'm trying to do the same thing in the communities that, you know, to address this public health issue within our community, and understanding how only 2 of those individuals were females of the 46. So you had 44 young people whose lives have been impacted, that for 90% of them were from the same environment. Mm-hmm. And so I'm saying, if we know that, we can address that specifically as the data tells us. So it's not like when I was in combat, it's element of surprise. We can pretty much tell. And, you know, when we went into jail cells, you know, all the kids, you know, when they when we take Turtle in there, they know the kids, they know it's an environment that they grew up in. But Casey, I'll let you go back and answer your question about the charges, and how I think our people need to understand, because I talk about this a lot. If you haven't seen the deal on Netflix, the 13th Amendment, the 13th Amendment speaks to that, and it says, slavery was overruled unless you commit a crime. So you're throwing your life away, because you're going to prison working for X amount a day, and the prison systems have quadrupled since 1980s. And so because we're not addressing these social determinants, and so these charges which you decide you're going to have, and people get out and make our communities unsafe, just so many community members wanted to know, what can we do to make our community safer, even though the bond from the judges is really out of the community's hand?
Well, it is out of the community's hand to the extent that the judge is setting it, but there are still a ton of factors that are taken into consideration, and I don't ever come on a show like this to try to put anything on anybody as far as responsibility. I feel like every one of us have a hand of something we can do better at whatever level that we work at, right? We all have responsibility with that. But the bond factors include multiple things. They include, the character of the defendant. They include how long they've been in an area. They include people that may come and vouch for them, as well as the severity of the charge and that sort of thing. So, there's 7 or 8 factors that are considered. And that is put by law just to make sure that they show up in court. That's what the goal is, to show up in court. You can take into consideration the severity, but all they're trying to do is assure that someone's going to show up in court again. And so
but if you charge them and then you retain them, they should, and if you think you have a person who has committed a murder or attempted murder, they have a choice of whether they show up or not.
So I don't disagree with you. If it sounded like I was going there,
I'm trying for my listener. I'm trying to make sure.
I 100% agree. Like, those are very serious charges in front of them, and if anything's going to cause somebody to not want to stick around, it would be that kind of a charge,
correct,
right? And so it oftentimes can feel like, to a family and to the community, that the courts are not paying enough attention to that, because the face in front of them is not the dead person that day.
That's exactly
the face
right.
in front of them is not oftentimes the person that was hurt. It is the defendant that is sitting there with the family members of the defendant a lot of times. So we have spent a lot, just recruit, I don't know if that's the right word, maybe encourage victims, families of victims, not even necessarily of that crime that's specifically in front of the court, but to come and be a face for the community that doesn't want to feel like those individuals are easily coming back out into their community. And to your point, you said it right before the break, we are working very hard to not approve an affidavit for a crime like that until we feel like that is a successfully investigated case by a detective that we can take to trial. That is why we're working with law enforcement along the way. So those affidavits that are in front of the courts before they ever issue the warrant have already been poured over, sometimes months, working on those investigations, sometimes close to a year if we're waiting on phone
correct.
dumps and phone records. And so you're right, by the time it's there, we get shocked as well sometimes with the fact that bonds are set at an amount that put people back out on the street a lot easier than what you would hope for. And so I do think that the community has to cry out about that as well, because
and how would the community do that?
They can show up. Our office will, it is easy to find out when there are bond hearings set. So if you are tied or connected to a case, there's going to be a victim witness person in our office that's assigned to that court, and anyone that wants to be kept up to date on court dates or when that might be heard can find that out from somebody in our office. Victim witness is the name to ask for, assigned to that specific case.
Is that so with the juvenile as well? Because but if the juvenile is charged as adult, then it's open to the public.
If the juvenile is charged as an adult, and we don't have bonds, we don't do the money bond situations in juvenile quite the same. We do the conditions of release instead of money bonds on those. So no, to your point, those are closed and confidential proceedings if it's a juvenile charge as a juvenile. There are still courts that will require more of the public to exit the courtroom even when a juvenile is charged as an adult. That's a case-by-case basis and depending on that court, but for the most part, those are open proceedings.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Well, that's interesting, as we look at dealing with what I've did some research, and I think it's really interesting to find for it was like last in 2023, there were 16 juveniles charged as adult for violent crimes. And what I find, and that's why I so appreciate what you're allowing us to work with, work with those kids and looking at rehabilitating their lives if possible. But what I've done over the last 18 months is look at what led to those violent acts. And because waiting to after they commit a violent act is really not helping the community nor helping the kid. And so what we found, looking at listening to this teenage violent crime qualitative assessment questions that we took from like the ACE. So I was able to sit down and talk to a few of them, but here was one of the questions: with how are you feeling today? As they let him out the cell to talk, he said, good. He said, what are you thinking about the most? My mother. What's else on your mind getting out? How old are you? He said, I'm 15. What's the highest grade you completed? 8th. Okay. Do you know your father? One said, I was told, took 2, said, no, never knew him. One said, yes, he just wasn't active. So these 2 I had to do at a time, and I'm going to tell you why I had to write this down simultaneously, because I immediately felt they couldn't read. And so they were just circling things, and I realized, but that's one of the conditions that usually lead to this type of behavior.
Absolutely.
And then here's the deal that was just for one that just stood out. I said, do you have any siblings? And one said, yes, I do. And I said, what's the age? He says 11, 12, 17, 16, and 18. So now you're looking at this crisis of what's going on with teenage pregnancy. I'm 15. Well, how old is your mother? 33. And so now so now I'm still extrapolating this information and said, okay, these are things associated. The kid really had no choice in his life.
Right.
I mean, he's been brought into a situation, and so that his life is almost, and I'm reading a book right now called The First 1,000 Days of a Child, and how the brains and all the things, the behavior is, and these kids, if you go back and look at how they were raised, and just allowing a kid to cry without grabbing him and holding him, how that impacts how they look at the world and how they feel. And so here are the things that First and 45 is examining, that we can really go back and and bring value to conceptualize the data-driven solutions based on these research facts that Black community can implement to save our sons, because these are the critical factors that's taking place. So, when a 17-year-old kid, when I go, we're working with him, my heart grieves, because really didn't have a chance. He was born into a situation that he didn't have support system get out of for various reasons, and then the other things that we're going to look at, in the second half is how we estimate what happened to these kids by not getting support, malnourished, all these things, brain developments that continue to pop up. I want to ask you: is there anything that you remember that just kind of stood out, that you were able to profile the young men or women that you were representing as a public defender, that was just consistent?
This is your Casey story for you, because I grew up very, very white. My first 4 or 5 years, whatever you want to call white privilege. I don't know if I was as privileged as some, but I grew up very, very white. In a school that did not have very many African Americans, K through 12. It was all one campus. And then I went to college, and your horizons are broadened a bit. And then I went to the work that I did for 20 years, which was at the public defender's office, but stationed out in juvenile court. And I got a whole new lesson. A whole new raising that second 25 years of my life. But I'll tell you the case that stands out to me to answer that question, which was the one that taught Casey more than anything, was a young man, and he is dead now. He was murdered. But he sat in court next to me as my client with his mother in the wind. Is what the testimony was. That just meant she was probably on drugs out in the community. They can't always find her. And the grandmother had come to court to be willing to take him, and the court was ordering a home study on her to see if she had a home that was able to have him and that sort of thing. Do we need to take a break?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We can pause that, and I can tell you. It's a good story.
We'll go ahead. Look at her. She already she already know what's going on, but she's good. We got the story. Hey, stay tuned. We're coming back from Miss Casey Beard, senior juvenile prosecuting attorney, was sharing stories about her experience.
No matter what comes my way, with help I can do all things. He didn't promise me that it would be easy, but he promised.
Black men have so many different problems, so many different issues. Homicide rate, high incarceration rate, fatherless homes. What is America going to do about it?
What are we going to do about it? Yeah, what are we going to do about it? When I say we, I'm talking to black men. I'm asking us, what are we going to do about issues that negatively impact black men and boys to a greater degree than other demographics? Everybody knows about the homicide epidemic in this country regarding black men and boys. While comprising only 6% of the nation's population, will account for 50% of the nation's homicide victims. So what are we going to do about it? Here's another disturbing reality. While making up only 6% of the nation's population, we're about 40% of the nation's prison population. In fact, 1 in 3 black males are projected to go to jail in their lifetime. Again, I ask, what are we going to do about it? Collectively, black men have the means to solve these problems. We just don't have the mind to do so. And means without the mind is mean thing.
I will make it. I can't. No doubt in my mind. I know I will.
All right, we're back with the second half, and Miss Casey, we apologize. We did have to take breaks for, you got to pay the bills and all of that, but you were sharing
that was a good place to take a break, so everybody in it, so they listen to pay the bills with.
Exactly.
So you could
Yeah,
pick
so
up. Yeah.
the client that was sitting next to me, his grandmother had come to court, and we were going to do a home study on her home to make sure she was an appropriate house to take him in and become his more legal primary caregiver in the situation. And that lady was working 3 jobs. One of them was for our government, the county that I worked, same county I worked for. She was a Pulaski County employee, but then she also worked 2 other jobs. So on paper, her income was actually really great. I don't remember the numbers and all that, but definitely enough to have taken care of this young man and potentially a sibling of his in her home. Yet her gas was not on. So they had an electric. Let me say this. Yeah, her gas was not on, and so they therefore did not have hot running water to fill up a bathtub or to take a shower in. And so y'all, over my head, right? This was years ago. This was before I had learned a lot of what I know now. And I lean over to my client, and I say to him, I don't understand. How do you take a warm, hot shower? Nobody can take a cold shower every day. He's like, Miss Casey, we just put a big pot on the stove and we warm it up on the stove because the stove's electric, And I was like, wow. Here's this lady working 3 incomes, has real decent money coming into her home, and she's choosing to not pay the gas bill because they can heat that water on the stove because she's helping support 3 of her adult children that are living in the wind on the street. And so she is about to just now be at the age where she can responsibly take care of this child while her other children are not there doing that. So you talk about social determinants, and I just explained in that one whole scenario so many of them.
That's exactly right.
She was probably a young parent. She probably now has her footing underneath her well enough to take care of her grandkids, so she's going to try to do it right. But that was going to require her to cut off her children that she was helping still supply whatever their needs were with her income so that she could have enough income in the home because they weren't going to approve her if she couldn't have the gas on in her home. It was a lesson in one child for me as to what people actually go through and the choices that they have to make and the way that life is viewed differently in that community versus mine, and has probably set me on the track to know a whole lot more now than I obviously knew 20 years ago. So.
Well, you said experiences shape your perception, and your perception shape your realities, and that's and that's why you have to get outside your comfort zone and try to understand what's going on. I want you to talk about one thing. Even though we continue to talk about this epidemic, the numbers are going down. They have gone down, and for various reasons, and sometimes people don't really know why. There are social factors that are taking place on that, but I think, addressing these on the front end help on the back end by trying to give youth help, because what we find out, many of our youth who are involved at a very early age without a rehabilitation game plan in their lives, we'll see them again as adults, and so speak to the factors that, outreach programs. I know with my mother, Yolanda Harrison, is how I met you, and then the gentleman that Brandon that we're going to be working with, he's already talks about starting a disciple program that's kind of like Mile Off the Forge, so we can identify individuals in his church community that have been struggling with substance abuse, and being able to do that. But your leadership in the office of the prosecutor's office, you all have allowed for this to take place. It really inspired. In fact, I've had several individuals call me from that presentation that Will made at church, and they want. In fact, I got a call on Thursday from one of the nonprofits and say, how can they get involved in that? So it's exciting to see the community embrace, the prosecutor's office for prevention and intervention. And rehabilitation and what I call resuscitation during incarceration. I mean, all those things that I want to talk about in the fourth quarter. But this third quarter, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about, the trajectory of crime has gone down for various reasons. I'll let you speak to that.
And Will came into office, his first day would have been January of 2023, and I joined him about 6 months after that. So I was part of his plan. I think that he would tell you. I mean, I think that he brings to the table, he and Kelly both, years of prosecutorial experience and the knowledge of how to review a case and review a crime and how to then put it forward in court to try to be successful for our community and that sort of thing. But they had not been a part of an office previously, or just historically, and anything about the office that also worked on the prevention intervention piece. And I think their big vision, Will's big plan, was always to have some parallel approach to prosecution, adding on a part that he didn't quite know as much about by bringing me on and letting me work in the community with that. And so as far as the trajectory of that, I think that he will still want us working, like you said, in the community with the community-based partners. I like to set this out there. There's room for everyone at the table. This is not an exclusive amount of work. Somewhere on the level from the conception that we talk about of these children that need the extra support, all the way through what we see as reentry from prison or whatever the programs are in prison. There are so many levels that there's room for everybody to invest their own heart piece, what they're good at, whatever it is that they can bring to the table across the board. And I think that Will is trying to say that's what we want for our community as somebody that has a platform for safety and prevention and intervention and, the hardcore prosecution piece whenever that needs to happen. We're going to step up to the plate and still take care of that. But all of the factors that are brought into court to maybe put before a judge to say that's why this person may not need to spend this amount of time or may not need to be held accountable for their actions, that is not really the position that our office takes. Our office takes the position that let's start at that conception piece. Let's start at that conception piece, and then let's work all the way while that child, at any point of contact. Will wants us to have gotten around a table at any point in contact so that we don't miss a child along the way in hopes of creating a child that is less hurt and less likely to hurt others, like you said. And so that is very forward thinking with the whole movement of our nation and realizing that prevention intervention is in the long term better in the big picture than the more prisons and more jails. We have to do both simultaneously for a bit until we have turned the community around. And Casey Beard's not going to turn the community around, right? Will Jones is not going to turn the community around. But if we can be an extension of any one of these partners and any one of these pieces to say we sit here looking at all this crime and we see where these holes are, then we want to do that. And you're right. You talk about substance abuse. We talk about education. We talk about literacy. We talk about maternal mental health. We want to have allies in all of that, all working together And to me, that's a connective, relational thing that we set in a really powerful position to say that's important, because we have a lot of discretion in that. And then if you've done all of that and you still have someone that chooses to break the law, we are there to wrap around that and to do everything that we need to do for the community and for the victims at that point. And we can look back and say our community did what it could. And I think that's the part that people misunderstand. You don't look at the person late in life and say, to bless their hearts that this is what they've done because of that. You back up and you start with everyone that's born along the way, and you never fail that child. Then you're going to create a different community. But that's a heart piece. That's not something that churches, and this is a huge part of the church, linking them with a family, not 10 families. Nobody can take on 10 families, right. But linking them with a family, and they're like, this is your responsibility to help coach these people, to help be their village, to help guide them to a place of safety or comfort or better when they need it. That is a really important part of and our community is small enough to do that. Our churches are big enough and our community is small enough to find every one of those individuals, and it doesn't have to be that family takes on all the burden, but they can help link them to the programs that are out there and get that assistance for them.
And you bring up something that I've learned through the Pregnant Crisis Center that I've been involved with our church and the organization, that we have volunteers there. I actually did a fundraiser, spoke as a keynote speaker at the fundraiser because I was doing data collection on teenage pregnancy. And it's really interesting how that correlates to violent crime, because if you look at the three most dangerous states right now in looking at teenage youth violence, it was Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. You know what's interesting about that? Those are three highest teenage pregnancy states. So there's a correlation to teenage pregnancy and violence. And so when you just mentioned that, what the data will suggest and tell you is that, to your point, if a church will get involved with the teenage pregnant mother, and if she doesn't have any more children, and support that child through the development, the malnourished, what we try to do with every cans, and for with support for formula, diapers, and the things that the baby needs. And I've talked to Mother Yolanda and about mobs getting involved in an effort to give their pain to these teenage girls who oftentimes need a grandmother with wisdom, because what you find many times that's happening is that the mother is 15, the mother of the child is 15, the grandmother is 35, the great grandmother. So you see this and there's not an experience of support system there. People just trying to make it, to your point of what you just shared about that individual. So understanding those are entry points into getting into the lives of people once it's been identified, but back that up to the schools. That's when the schools have to identify and say, oh, we have a teenage pregnant young lady here that's going to need help. Then you have to reach outside and just not let that happen, because if you realize what's birthing 2% of this population, where it's coming from, and understanding that's the intervention piece. Because you can't prevent, that's already happened, but now that we know.
Setting that mama up for success.
That's exactly right.
Setting that mama up for success so that we're already on that two-generation approach before that baby ever comes. Don't start once the baby arrives.
That's exactly right.
Start it way before.
Nourishment, giving the family, what it needs, and a support system to say, okay, where's this child, what does this child need? And to your point, when you said, you're not asking a church to take 50 kids. I mean, here's one that you can do. But those are intentional things that we can do that address this crisis that's birthed from teenage pregnancy. And it continues. And that's a sin issue that used to be addressed, because as the number said, in 1940, 19% of black children were born outside of wedlock. Today, it's been as high as 74%. And so you're trying to fix a problem, and what it's saying is that this is creating a pipeline to prison. And so that's what you're having to prosecute, because nobody's cut off that faucet. And
we do not break the pipeline to prison in the court after the bang has happened.
That's exactly right.
We cut off the pipeline years before that.
Yep. Hey, we're going into the fourth quarter. Let's give it up for Chief Casey Beard. Yeah. Who house? Casey house. That's right. We get ready for fourth quarter. Everybody put their hands in the air and wave like you just don't care. It's the fourth quarter. Bishop Fred, Coach Fitz, and Senior Beard will be right back.
Black men have so many different problems, so many different issues. Homicide rate, high incarceration rate, fatherless homes. What is America going to do about it?
What are we going to do about it? Yeah, what are we going to do about it? When I say we, I'm talking to black men. I'm asking us, what are we going to do about issues that negatively impact black men and boys to a greater degree than other demographics? Everybody knows about the homicide epidemic in this country regarding black men and boys. While comprising only 6% of the nation's population, will account for 50% of the nation's homicide victims. So what are we going to do about it? Here's another disturbing reality. While making up only 6% of the nation's population, we're about 40% of the nation's prison population. In fact, 1 in 3 black males are projected to go to jail in their lifetime. Again, I ask, what are we going to do about it? Collectively, black men have the means to solve these problems. We just don't have the mind to do so. And means without the mind is mean thing.
Oh, the Lord, he's a very great guide. Anything I want and need, he will supply it for me. Ooh, I can.
Okay, we're back with the fourth quarter, and Ms. Casey, you said something that was so powerful. You talked about the importance of the church, and in many cases today, when you look at year 2025, most youth juveniles are not, they're unchurched. But the critical piece is not just the church by itself, but you talked about the church and the programs. Can you just kind of speak a little bit to that, and then to that mother that's out there that don't know about the programs that are out there? I think Coach mentioned, maybe some of the experiences that have been more effective as you've been, because you want the kids to, you're not trying to send them down the pipeline to prison. You're trying to, you want that reentry, you want that restoration.
And I don't want to miss out on the schools. Like he's right. This is it's like a perfect trilogy, is what I always say. It is home, it is school, and it is the community. And so church is part of the community, but so are our community-based providers. And so when I talk about that heart piece, I guess what I would, in my pie in the sky, like lovely view of this would be to have an army of the heart piece, right? And that is primarily going to always be our religious, moral value members of the community and churches in the community. But they are not going to always have those community-based resources. And so educating them on how to even help link with the person that can help link the family with more. So I always talk about, 100 families is a huge piece of that. But it doesn't have to be 100 families. It can be a literal phone call to somebody that just knows a little bit more than you. So if you're in church with Fitz and there's a family working with a family and they just go say to somebody like Fitz, here's what we've got. He might have met somebody along the way. I might have met somebody along the way. We open the doors of our office and meet with people on a regular basis where they come in, they tell us what they're struggling with, and we're like, oh, well, we could link you with so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, and you probably will have some of that help. So the community-based providers, we are actually very rich with resources in our community. Whether you just look at that as Little Rock or you expand it to Pulaski, we are the capital city, and we are in the heart of all that. So we're super fortunate with the resources we have. The city has resources. Carter's Crew is a great resource for pro-social, for children. United Family Services has the contracts with the court. We work with a really great counseling agency that has an internship program. And so if a family links with a family and sees needs, there is probably somebody in your own church that can then link them a little bit further. So it might not be that everybody loves to throw around, you need therapy, or drug and alcohol counseling. It isn't always that. It is maybe just a pro-social program. It is maybe just a link to the city job programs, somebody that helps you get a ride there, somebody that helps you fill out the the application, helps you figure out what you do for a resume, just experience and that sort of thing. Transportation's a huge issue, and I don't know if churches have much of a help with that either, but it always is hard.
Bishop got a van.
Got his van, and Carter's Crew does some traveling, and then United Family Services has some case management services, and
and that's huge. Transportation is huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. DHS, nobody wants to have that in your life. We want to be preventing that from happening. But if they are needed in order to help the hurt children get out of a hurt situation, then there are resources that we can turn to there. But then the schools have providers within the school, so you might just pick up the phone and call the counselor and say, who do we turn to? So,
and I think that's so important, the school person, because that's really part of the detection that we're talking about, rather than waiting to have the fact, this kid hadn't shown up or this kid is not involved. That's why I'm a proponent of athletics, because when my mother, when my father died and my mother it was a coach that came to my house, and that's really saved my life. I can look at today, but to your point, I want to talk about these early detection strategies, because what we found out with our program and our pilot with the Juvenile Detention Center, that many times the 18-year-olds, under 18, they go to, and then they stay there until it's time for them to go. If they're going to do, 30 or 40 year charge, they go to the juvenile until they turn 18. But what we find, even those on lesser charges for property theft or whatever, what we find, even though when you start making those decisions at 15, 14, 15, 16 years old, if you do not have the Department of Justice research says, if you're not rehabilitated during your time in the juvenile, if you just go there and stay without an intentional transformative plan for your life, the data says that 85% of those kids involved in those facilities will reoffend within 5 years on average for a 12-year sentence. So that's why what we're trying to create for that kid, that's part of the rehabilitation diversion, because they're there and you have an opportunity to rehabilitate them in a structured environment because they're locked up. Okay? Then the other one's early detection strategies is in school, that you have people looking and said, okay, a dropout, a person not in school, what we find out, a dropout is usually a person that you will be arresting if they're not involved in anything, all right? And then you have the prevention strategies that we're saying that I'm proponent of the church is taking place for, hey, they can address teenage pregnancies and what we can do in the community to do that. So those are the things that I look at, that I'm so glad to work with you on: prevention strategies, early detection strategies, rehabilitation, diversion treatment, and then actually trying to resuscitate the lives of the kids that are incarcerated, so that they're not copying a 12-year sentence and we're not paying that money for them. It's cheaper to get education than it is incarceration. Your thoughts?
Well, rehabilitation, none of this works if you're not creating the village to make it work. Like, just deciding to not put somebody in jail or to divert them, that is not going to work if the community is not there to support that plan. So the community has to be caught up to that big picture. The community has to be caught up to that big plan. And if the community will catch up and agree that that is just as important, and hold everyone in their community accountable, hold the churches accountable, hold the schools accountable, hold the community-based providers accountable to these children, then you will see change. It's impossible to not see change, but you can't just say, we're not going to put them in court, we're going to divert them, we're going to rehabilitate, if you don't line up those rehabilitative connections. And I will say, Will has been in office for 2 years, and I think homicide is down, something like 54% since 2022. That is not Will alone, but I do think his leadership has a lot to do with that, because this connective piece is new, and this me sitting here with you is new. This is because of where I work now. We are able to share each other's experiences, which can only help in that prevention, intervention, and rehabilitative piece that is the movement of the future, right?
Right.
Just it has to start long before it makes it to my office.
Well, and understanding that, so one thing we're looking at, 85 to 90. We were at the Juvenile Detention Center last year in 2023, and we asked everybody who had been suspended in elementary school to stand up, and 90% of them stood up. So understanding that, and it's really against the law. I served on state board for 7 years to suspend a kid in elementary school, but it happens. We know that. Okay, so what I'm trying to get people to understand, those kids that you're suspending in elementary school, that's the creation of the pipeline to prison. And those kids it's something from when a 7-8-year-old kid can't be still in school. There's something's going on, and so to send him back to the environment which caused the trauma of his behavior are usually the social determinants that's going to lead to that. At 15 years old, that you're charging him as an adult. That's what the data says.
I mean, not only our leaders in the schools, but our decision makers, the board members, have got to realize that if they don't come up with a situation within the school for all of those individuals, a way to wrap around that different kind of education, that different kind of skill, trade, learning. Not everyone's going to go to college, especially more and more every day now.
Right.
The skills and the trades are so important to make them employable in the future and to give them meaning. My own child, it changed her life to be 15 and have a job at a little restaurant in town. And somebody else telling her that she was amazing and doing a good job, it builds something in them that we are overlooking, I think, in our schools at this time. So it's every level.
Right.
Room for everybody at every level.
And that's the thing that we're trying to understand is that looking at these social terms, so by extrapolating what the data says, it looks to this data here that just crushes my heart. A black male born to a teenage mother in poverty, upon conception, when the sperm hit the egg, has a 50% chance of going to prison. Now think about that.
It's real sad.
That's right. And so how can we change those social determinants? And so Bishop for us is understanding how sin is wrapped up in this. That we must understand that it's a fundamental approach. I call it air, land, and sea. You got to do the air. It's combat that you got to, because Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. But God has come for us to have life and have it more abundantly. But Satan is winning in this element, in this specific population. What I said, 2% of the population in America is responsible for over 50% of the homicides. Now that's tragic, because if we could invest in that 2%, then we could reduce 50% of the homicides. Think about that out. That's incredible. Hey, I know it's getting time for us to wrap up, and Senior Casey Beard, we're so grateful. I'm going to have you back. And Bishop, we're going to let you close us out in a word of prayer. We're so grateful for this opportunity. And tell Will we'll appreciate everything that we're doing to work with him. And excited about hopefully one time he'll consider coming on the show with us.
Sure he will.
Yeah.
God, we thank you for our guest tonight. Thank you for the time of sharing. Thank you for the viewers and listeners and those that are just going to go out and help to make a difference and save our black boys' lives. We pray that you would keep us all safe and cover us by your blood. Keep us by your spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
Great God.